Hi everybody, I am Dr. Lisa Love and this is my third class on the spiritual human, and this time we're going to look at the 7 stages of spiritual evolution. So let me start by sharing my screen and getting us to that area. And here we go. So the way that I like to work is I always start fairly simple and then I get more complex, and that's what we're going to do in this video. So we will start by understanding that Bailey essentially has 7 different levels, and she calls them planes. I prefer the word levels. We have the physical plane, the emotional plane, the mental plane. Don't worry about what all these mean. We're going to find out fairly quickly. The intuitional plane, the spiritual plane, and these 2 levels I've combined together into what I call beyond human spiritual planes. So now we have the actual Bailey model here to the right. And again, we have my simplified version. And let's line them up again. So here we have the physical plane. And don't worry about all these words. We're going to get into them more in just a little bit. I just want you to see my simplified version next to her version. Emotional plane, mental plane, intuitional plane, which she also calls the Buddhic Plane, the spiritual plane, or the Atmic Plane, the Monadic Plane, and the Divine Plane. So there you have kind of another step in digging into her model. Let's dig a little further. Now you will see that I am highlighting certain triangles in here. Now I'm going to move my video. I don't know if that's going to hide what I'm trying to show you or not when I get to the Zoom video and look at it. But let's go through these different triangles to let you know these colors were given by me, not given by Bailey. I did that by being inspired by Don Beck's Spiral Dynamics. But Bailey does give colors in her books. I just haven't done enough of the research to get the specific colors that she would put there. So the colors that I have put there are basically following the spectrum of colors and the chakra system. So don't get too caught up on the colors or thinking that they are accurate. They may not be, but it is a nice way to visually see something important. Just bringing up the pointer for a moment. And that is how each one of these 7 planes has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planes within it. Meaning that we have 7 subplanes which within each of the 7 planes, making 49 subplanes altogether, which I think it's easier to see the divisions of those subplanes if you give them some nice colors, which is why I did it. But I also want you to notice something, and that is this group of subplanes here. What they represent is the development of the personality. See how she has that word there, personality? There are 18 subplanes there. So when you read about that in her book, the 18 subplanes are all about the development and growth of the personality. I put that kind of triangle there to just make it easier for you to visualize it. And the integrated personality, as she calls it, always maintains its individuality, but the way that it expresses itself, if you watch the previous video from this class, the 3 stages of development, integrated personality, soul-infused personality, and moving into the monad, you'll have a better understanding of this video. If you don't have that basic information, I recommend that you go back and review that video, because that's the most simplified understanding I can give you of Bailey's model. But this personality is comprised of, bringing my pointer back, the plane of the lower mind and its 4 subplanes, the emotional plane and its 7 subplanes, and the physical plane and its 7 subplanes. Now, we will come back to an understanding of what the personality looks like here, because it's not so much, as I'm understanding it, the integrated personality within these 4 subplanes, as it is moving into the soul-infused personality more and more at that level. So that's my understanding of her system so far. Let's keep going. Now I want you to notice these little triangles and these little dots here. These are basically the chakras that come down through the mental plane. The dots are right here. When you look at her model. Then we see them here on the emotional plane. Then we see them here on the physical plane. So what this is trying to show is that the mental, emotional, and physical planes flow into the etheric body of the chakras. Here's the list of what the different chakras are down here. They flow into the mental, emotional, and physical bodies of the chakras, so to speak. And some people have said that there are actually different levels of the chakras that you can see. Some say there's just one chakra that you see, and it just has different colorings or different vibrations or different qualities of light, depending upon how much of these higher subplanes are shining through within those chakras. Again, this is the integrated personality, which is the path of individuation, if you watched the previous video. Now, I put this deliberately down here in the emotional and physical planes, because up here, there's the word personality in her chart. We have this little thing called the egoic lotus. It's interesting, different systems like to have a flower. In Buddhism, you have a lotus. In Christianity, you have a rose. So you have similar symbolism here. And the idea is that these petals unfold petal by petal. There's actually 12 petals. There are, you can kind of read it here, 3 knowledge petals, 3 love petals, 3 sacrifice petals. Don't worry, we'll come back to a bigger slide of this later on in this video. But the idea is that there are 12 stages that these petals are associated with. 12 petals are associated with different stages of spiritual evolution. And when those stages are complete, there's the egoic lotus. And it exists, by the way, on the plane of the solar angel, she calls it. Don't worry, we're going to come back to these ideas. You become more and more the soul-infused personality, or she calls it the ego. Now, her word ego actually is kind of a more spiritualized self. It's a soul-infused personality. It's not how most of us are using ego today. That's more like the integrated personality. The selfish, separative self is how most people use the word ego. That's not how it was used back then. It was basically symbolic of the soul 100 years ago. So the meaning of the word has changed from the time she put forward her system. This up here is essentially the spiritual triad. You see the word there. And I've drawn this little triangle to make it easier for you to see. And we're going to go into what that means momentarily. I'm just trying to give you an orientation here. And this spiritual triad is what's called Atmic, Buddhic, Monastic. Atma, Buddhi, Manas. Here it is, the last little bit of this triangle goes to the top of the Atmic plane, the top of the Buddhic plane, and the top of the Monastic plane. It's my belief that has an association with the 3 kayas that you see in Buddhism. But I don't want to get too complicated here. I won't get into that more. I want you to notice that this spiritual triad is connected again, as I just said, to the monastic plane, which is called the monastic permanent atom, the Buddhic permanent atom, and the Atmic permanent atom. I can speak. And we will go over that again shortly in this video. This is just the orientation. And we have monad, where we're on the path of identification. That actually starts down here as we move more and more through the spiritual triad. And these are stages of spiritual growth and development. These words seem fancy, like they're entities or something, but they're not. They're symbolic of stages of personal growth and development. And once we have completed this shift, we have built the rainbow bridge, so to speak, from the soul, or the Antakarana it's also called, from the soul up to the monad, which in Bailey's model reflects as will, says wisdom, sometimes it says love, will, love, and intelligence, or will, wisdom, and activity, this version of her model says here. when that is completed, it is said that the soul, which is relative, disappears. It's crucified, it dies. Again, that can seem like fancy, strange language, but what it simply means is we have so completed the stages of development as the causal body or the egoic lotus, body of causes, the egoic lotus unfolds. Those stages have been completed. These stages, as we move through the spiritual triad, bridging the monad and the personality together, have been completed, so that we now are existing on the plane of the monad. All right. Now that hopefully you're preferring the simplified version, let's go back. It was so much easier. We're going to get a little bit more complicated, I'm afraid. But before we do that, I want to show you some related models here, because Bailey did not come to her model by herself. This is a model that was originally given by H.P. Blavatsky in her book, The Key to Theosophy, or HPB as she was called. Now, Bailey was a theosophist, and there are some that are in the theosophical world that prefer this original model and get kind of upset. They're, well, kind of upset or really upset. Some of them get really upset. I've even been onto some theosophy blogs where they want to call Bailey demonic because she dared to create her model and didn't stick with this original model of Blavatsky. But I think it's important to understand that this original model exists. I don't want to get into the details of the comparisons here. I just want you to be aware that this was the original model that Bailey was exposed to. But she was also exposed to this model, which came from a woman named Annie Besant and a man named Charles Ledbetter. Besant inherited the Theosophical Society. HPB appointed Annie Besant as her president before HPB passed away. And this is the model that Besant and Ledbetter put forward. And you can see the 7 subplanes emerging. You can see different kinds of words emerging. And the way that I approach this, I've been around people of all these different groups. I'm somebody that I call myself a misfit. I don't really fit in anywhere because I like to explore too many different models. I like to explore integral. I do my blog to bridge these things to integral. I like to explore esoteric Christianity and Buddhism and all these different models. That's kind of my thrill in life, as well as nature. I like nature a lot too. But anyway, enough about me. Let's go back to the models. And so I myself don't step in any of the arguments of whose model is better or who took from who or how dare Bailey not stick with the original theosophical model, you know, how dare Besant and Ledbetter expanded the model from the original, blah, blah, blah. I just don't like to go into that kind of thing. If that bothers you, then you can just step out of this video because we're going to go even further and go back into the Bailey model. But I do think it's important that you understand these differences, these debates, and maybe you are going to be somebody that prefers this model or maybe this model. Maybe you want to throw Bailey out. I don't care. That's fine with me. But I'm just presenting Bailey's model in this video. Here we go. So I promised you that we would get into a little bit more of the specifics. So this is a blow up of the physical plane. And I'm going to point out a few things to you here. First of all, I want you to notice the increased definition of what goes on these 7 subplanes of the physical plane. First of all, we have that this is physical or physical dense. This is, you know, this hand looks physical dense. But underneath this hand and in this body, there is water. And we know that most of the human body is made up of liquid and water. And in this model, we have a gas here. And then after that, we move into the fourth, third, second, and first ethers. Now, I have a whole video you can go watch that explains way more about this physical plane and also tries to relate these different things to earth, water, fire, air, ether, and talks about how it relates to the Tibetan Buddhist system and to the death process. And it can also relate to the birth process of how we come into incarnation, but that's not the point of this video. You can go find those videos from me. Some other things you're going to see here. Here's the blow up of those chakras. Head center right here. Heart center right here. Throat center right there, etc. So she puts in the spleen here. Generative organs instead of sacral center, solar plexus. And this is the base of the spine. Now, I'm familiar with the chakra system as given more by India. And I really recommend a book by Harish Johari if you really want to get into it. And he has a wonderful CD as well that talks about the different sounds of the different petals in the different chakras. Not just the seed bija sounds, but the actual sounds in the petals. It's really wonderful. You can find that. So, this is our outer appearance in the physical world. It's what you're looking at here, my hand, my face. It's seemingly who I am. And as we move up the physical plane, it begins with the coordination of the body when we're young. So this whole process of coming into incarnation as a baby, getting born, you know, learning how to coordinate the body, and until we get more mastery of the body, usually that happens, hopefully for most young adults, by the time they're in their early 20s. They are often driven towards a lot of physical accomplishments. For some reason, I'm somebody that likes to watch mountain climbers. Rock climbing was one of my favorite things once upon a time. I like to watch explorers. I have explorers in my family history. So I really enjoy watching people that are exerting themselves physically, especially when they're much younger than me now. And they are able to really push the limits of the physical body. It's amazing. And the ability to do that represents getting, to me, higher and higher on the physical plane. The more and more mastery you have of the physical body, the higher you are on the physical plane. Going through the physical plane, I believe, also represents the body's capacity to maintain its prana and coherency throughout life. Sometimes I talk too fast. Sorry about that. Sometimes I mix up my words when I talk too fast. So I put this picture of this young woman and this older woman here to kind of give you a sense of the range that we go through on the physical body. Here we have somebody young, kind of fully into the physical body, and somebody older, I'm starting to get there myself, who is starting to withdraw from the physical body. And especially in my video on death, you can see the withdrawal of the density of the physical body. That's why bones tend to break. That's why the skin is not so fluid with liquid and collagen and those kinds of things. Maybe that's why older people get more gaseous, etc. You know, there's just not the same capacity to have that mastery over the physical body because we're withdrawing from it later in our lives. And the apex is reached when individualization occurs. And if you watch my previous video on this course, you'll see the Rouge test, which is the demonstration that humans are individualized. You put a red dot on a child's head, and most people don't know this, but up until 15, 18 months for most human beings, the child will look in a mirror and it will have no idea that that's them in the mirror. Kind of strange sounding, isn't it? They don't know. They'll look behind the mirror to find the child that they see. They don't understand they have a red dot on their head. They don't know who's got that dot. They don't know to rub that dot off. They're clueless. But at some point they know it's them. That's me in the mirror. I have a red dot on my head. That's significant. And supposedly humanity reached that stage a long, long time ago, and we recapitulate it. We go through it when we're born very quickly. And we usually
arrive at that point of recapitulation between 15 to 18 months. I want you to notice something else, the physical permanent atom. Now this borrows from theosophical tradition, which borrows in a lot of ways from Hindu tradition, from esoteric Christianity, from Buddhism, etc. This is the whole idea that at the end of life, this woman here, all the learnings that she had about the physical body are kind of condensed into, we could say, the DNA, into the atomic structure, those minute particles. And then that's what's abstracted from the physical body. All the lessons that were learned throughout the life are condensed into this tiny little thing. Now that's not so far out for us to think about. 100 years ago, that was really far out. But now, you know, I can put, I don't know how many videos and songs and everything on a teeny tiny thing like this. So it's not so far out to think of this idea of a physical permanent atom anymore. Let's go to the emotional plane. And this picture is meant to represent those that are kind of at the height of the emotional plane. They are what Bailey calls an integrated personality. They are masters of the universe, so to speak. They know how to get what they want in the physical world. And if you watch the previous video on the 3 stages, this is the completion of the individuation stage. It starts when we just realize that's me in the mirror. It ends when we realize I'm a master of this universe in a separative and often selfish way. And that's the problem with this stage. So let's look at this emotional plane. Again, you see these kind of chakras here. You see a similar thing with the astral permanent atom here. You see these names. This is the plane of the emotions. It's the cosmic liquid plane. Water is often associated with emotions. When they're turbulent, it's like choppy seas. When they're calm, it's like a clear, calm lake. We use a lot of a language of water for emotions. This is also known as the astral plane, because it has that kind of liquid-like feel to it. And when people talk about going into the astral plane, we can kind of see that now in a lot of our technology. It has that liquidy kind of, you know, like touch it and it would bounce kind of thing. It's not quite real. It's not quite solid. It's also known as the Kama plane, the plane of desire. Kama is desire. Kama manas is another word, the Kama manasic plane, the desire mind. Manasic is mind, the desire mind. This is the overall plane of desires. And when we can't coordinate the physical body, we may get to the point where we're starting to have some desires, but we have no way to get those desires met. I'm a mother, you kind of watch the little kid that's like crawling along, getting frustrated because the legs aren't working and they want to go somewhere and they want to get something. Or sometimes the child laughs in glee when they fall down as they're trying to get to a toy, or they cry in frustration. You know, that's because the physical body is not yet able to give them what they want in the way of their desires, but they start to get there. And when they start to get there, they get more and more insistent that they get what they want until we socialize them a little bit. And that's a whole process. We're not going to go into that here. We're going to go into that in the 10 groups that Bailey talks about. But what I want you to get the understanding of is down here, it's very difficult to get our desires met, even as human beings. The more we get in here, it's more easy to get our desires met, but we're really still frustrated in being able to do that a lot. Up here, we're these people. We can get all our desires met. We're like the 1%ers. We're like the billionaires. We have so many of our desires met that we almost don't know what to do with it all. If we were beyond the stage of integrated personality, we would be learning how to do something more with our lives than just engage in the world of the 5 senses to get our desires met. But humanity is primarily in here, so says Bailey. I'm inclined to believe that's true. Mostly obsessed with things like money, security, pleasure, sex, and eventually when you get up here, you get more power. You know, you just simply go into any town and you look, and it's kind of obvious that this is where most human beings are at. What are almost all towns about? Just look at the stores. It's about the body. How to make the body look good, how to make the body feel better, how to put tattoos on the body, how to decorate the body with clothes. It's about pleasure, the food you want to eat, the stuff you want to drink, the high you want to get with some marijuana or something like that. It's all about entertainment pleasure through the movie theaters, getting an adrenaline rush. It's all about sex, 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 sex everywhere. It's all about eventually power to get all of the sex, pleasure, money, security you want, so you can be a master of the universe. That's pretty much a summary of the evolution that goes on at this stage. So we talked about the capacity to fulfill desires is limited at the bottom and mastery at the top. The ability to understand and manage emotions is also limited at the bottom. It's much more primitive. It's much more childlike. I have some video clips on this we're going to watch later on as we go through this course, not in this video. And then in here, it's much more managed. We want to be good. We want to fit in. We want to be liked. So we manage our emotions. We don't really understand them, but we manage them better. And even up here, when we have more mastery at the top, the reason I put the word more mastery at the top is it still doesn't mean we really understand our emotions. We just know how to manipulate others better with them. So we know how to pretend that we're really wonderful and convey that charisma and give that power aura so other people's emotions are all entranced with us. Or we know how to get really angry. I was in drama, so I'm dramatic. That's just something you're gonna have to get used to with me, with this personality incarnation. So we can get really angry at somebody and we can control them through that anger. That was one of my specialties at one time, was dealing with people as a counselor who were sexually and physically abused. And I did a lot of research on understanding abuse. And a lot of abuse goes on by these upper levels because we have the power to abuse, but we don't have the emotions really understood or sensitized enough to have compassion, to have empathy. These are going to be way beyond the emotional plane in this model. So we have to be careful. Just because you're at the top of the emotional plane, it doesn't necessarily mean that you understand the emotions unless you infuse this level with the higher planes, get into these levels and infuse the emotional plane. Then this whole thing cleans up a lot more and it tends to be calmer and it tends to be filled more with compassion. But that's because we're taking something from like the higher mental planes or the Buddhic plane and infusing it into the emotional plane, that we see that coming through the emotions. We have more mental understanding of our emotions and we infuse that into the emotional plane. But here, it's really important to know most human beings in the Bailey model are like right in here. The cream of humanity, she says, are going in here. This is the cream of humanity. This is what we get to look forward to. They're not all selfish and terrible. Go back and watch the previous video on the three stages in the Bailey model. They can be humanitarians and they can be overall very good people, but they still are caught up in the world of the five senses. They still, in their humanitarian endeavors, often want to be known for what they do. They want to, have their pictures with the famous people. They want to have their names on buildings. They want to get their tax write-offs for their charitable donations. Nothing wrong with any of this. I'm just saying it still is primarily has a separative kind of feeling about it. Now, you could do those same things at a higher level and use that for leverage for the sake of service. So you always have to watch the motive here. But I want you to get a sense of what this is like here. This is Bailey's primarily groups 3, 4, 5, and 6. We'll talk about her groups in the next video. But I look out in the world and I think this is kind of true. It does seem like most human beings are chemomonastic. It does seem like most human beings are on the plane of emotions or the plane of desire. It does seem that way. Now, they have poor discernment in healthy desires down here. They don't know what to desire. They don't know what's really good for them. And they don't know how to get it. So they'll not discipline themselves and keep themselves from impulsive spending, or impulsively having sex with people, or impulsive drinking, or any kind of addictive behavior. A lot of addictive behavior goes on at this level, even at the top here, addicted to power kind of thing. It's very addictive, this emotional plane. It's somewhat better at the top, and I use the word somewhat better because they still don't know how to really desire soul desires, higher desires, spiritual desires. So that is a problem here. But the apex results in them becoming the integrated personality, which, as I said, is still selfish and separative. So that's a brief overview of the Bailey model and how she views the emotional plane. Now, I have kind of a problem with, I said this in the previous video on the 3 stages, with this idea that this is the cream of humanity. It's kind of a bummer to me. It's like, great, this is what we have to look forward to. You know, hopefully they're good people that are separative and caught up in the world of the 5 senses, but they're driven at least by good motives. But there's still going to be a lot of competing in the way of power, etc. You know, it feels a little dystopian to me, that view that Bailey puts out. She also said that it's very important for us to get people at the next levels we're going to look at in place to help mitigate what could be the very destructive effects of this group. And some of that you can kind of see, at least I think I can kind of see out there, the importance of that. There's the astropermanent atom, and this is the sum total of everything that you've learned about desire primarily, and also, did it work? I have a friend who always used to say to me, how's that working for you? How did that work for you? And we can see that with a lot of integrated personalities. How's that working for you? You got all the power you want in the world. You got the hot babe wife or boyfriend or husband or girlfriend. You're a supermodel. You know, you've got all the money, all the pleasure, all the sex you could ever want. How's that working for you? Did it really bring you the happiness you deserve? And if the answer is no, that's when we go to here. This is where the spiritual path begins in the Bailey model. And it starts with something called the aspirant. We're not going to get into that too detailed here. We'll learn these terms more and more through this course. But the aspirant is somebody who's still primarily an integrated personality, group 6, but kind of edging out of the emotional plane into the mental plane, where they kind of want spiritual life, but they want it all. They want to be spiritual, and they want to be recognized as being really spiritual too. And they still want power, spiritual power now. They want power, they want pleasure, they want sex, they want money, they want security, they want all the same things as an integrated personality. But they're spiritual. That's even better, because you get more followers that way. You get more money in your bank account. You get to have more hot babes doing the yoga, or hot guys doing the yoga. You know, that's just like barely going onto the mental plane in the Bailey model. Now, there's going to be some confusion here with people that are studied in the Bailey model. And I myself had to bust out of this. And if I'm off, I'm more than happy to get some tweaks to my understanding. I've been tweaking it for, my gosh, I'm giving my age away, but for decades, let me just say that. I've been tweaking it for decades. In the last 4 years, those of you that have been following my blog, it used to be Ageless Wisdom versus Integral. Now it's Spiritual Psychology, a Comparative Approach. If you're following my blog, you will know that I have put up many, many versions of the Bailey model as I've come to understand it better. And my most popular post there so far is How the Mind Unfolds. I suggest you look at it. It's based on a compilation I did of the mental body as understood in the Bailey model. And going through the mental plane is really, really different than I thought it meant decades ago. The plane of the lower mind is not the Kamenic mind. It's not the desire mind. It's the ability to increasingly go beyond the realm of the 5 senses into the interior realm of the mind, where we can increasingly witness and observe the desires. So we shift beyond the realm of the five senses. We develop the mind more, and we're capable to see more the inner versus the outer realms. That's a very important thing. I have to tell you, I'm learning. Just a second. I don't want to redo this video, so I'm sorry about this, but I have to plug it in. There we go, so that it doesn't die in the middle of this class. So we become what's called the soul-infused personality. The soul, the egoic lotus, it's also called the soul, which is real, but it's also relativistically real. It's relative. That soul is trying to infuse that personality. Here's a line that starts with that personality, with soul values. And it starts that process primarily in the plane of the lower mind, which I'm understanding is where we're going through Bailey's probationary path, eventually reaching what I believe is the first initiation right around here. There will be some Bailey people that may not agree with that. I welcome the debate and discussion. I'm open to tweaks. But based upon the research I've done so far, that's what I'm seeing. Probationary path to the little Chela ship, it's called, to Chela in the light. We'll talk about this more in other videos. To right about here. This is the Chela in the light stage that I have. Probationary path with some aspirant kind of bleeding into it. Plane of the lower mind. This is where it becomes an equilibrium between soul and personality. The balance is there. And I have the references for a lot of what I say, if people want me to find them. And maybe in future videos, I will actually put up the quotes. I usually put the quotes in my blog on the book. This would be the book, Becoming Soul. You can see how I'm referencing what Bailey actually says in this argument. So then we are also developing the mind to help us see the inner versus the outer realms. If we just want intellectual mastery of the outer realms, Bailey has a lower concrete mind. She has 6 levels of mind in her model. And she has a lower concrete mind that exists on the emotional plane. And she has a lower concrete mind that exists on the mental plane. And you really have to become aware of what she means when she's distinguishing between the two. Because the lower concrete mind on the mental plane, which I argued in my books, Becoming Human, is really a lot like Piaget. It's my ability to kind of look out in the world here and to know how to build a car, because I'm able to have mastery with concrete facts. It's my ability to know how to navigate a computer. That's not lower concrete mind on the mental plane in the Bailey model. It was a big shock for me when I ran into that. That's not the same here. So I don't have time in this video to go into the 6 levels of mind, but I recommend that you take a look at that. And for those of you that are new to the model, I'm sorry for all this digression, but I know that there will be people that are regular Bailey students that will be confused by some of what I'm saying, so I have to take a little time to clarify it in this video. This is where, again, you become the soul-infused personality, and you start on the path of initiation here. You also have increased mental discernment. As you access those inner realms, you start to understand what those inner realms are really about. You gain knowledge about the inner realms, not the outer realms. That's the lower concrete mind on the emotional astral plane. This is knowledge about the inner realms, but eventually knowledge has to be transformed into wisdom. And there is the person on the path of initiation. And here we have also some other words, cosmic, gaseous. So the word gas is coordinated with the mental plane. So when we go back to the physical plane and we see dense, liquid, gaseous, we know that that's kind of like the mental, physical, liquid, the emotional, physical. There's correlations that are made in these different planes to the planes above and below. The monastic plane, manas, is mind and or mental plane. And the plane of the solar angel, where the egoic lotus is. We have also the monastic permanent atom, which is the sum total of learning regarding your awareness of the inner realms. And the mental unit, which is more connected to that personality line, the sum total of what the personality itself is learning. So there's a difference between what the integrated personality, life after life, is learning. That's more in the mental unit that is operating in each and every life. And the monastic permanent atom, which is stored up in the spiritual triad. Remember, it was monastic, Buddhic, Atmic. Remember that triangle we just saw? Stored up there. There's the egoic lotus, also known as the soul, plane of the solar angel, plane of the lower mind, plane of the solar angel. Here's the different words: the egoic lotus, the soul, the causal body. And this has different petals: sacrifice petals, red, red, red; love petals, blue, blue, blue; knowledge petals, green, green, green; and the 3 yellow petals in the center. Now, these are symbols again. They represent different stages of spiritual growth and development, and we will go into that in a later video. I'm going to do a whole class on the egoic lotus. Okay, going up, we get the Buddhic permanent atom. There's that triangle again: Atmic, Buddhic, monastic. We get the different subplanes, or sublevels, I call them. This is the plane of at-one-ment. Now, you can have an idea of unity consciousness earlier. In fact, the first time we have it is at the first initiation, the first expansion of consciousness. Bailey talks about 9 expansions of consciousness in her model. We'll have another video on her initiations later. But you can have that initial sense of the oneness of everything. But only when you get on the plane of at-one-ment, the Buddhic plane, are you increasingly mastering living as that oneness. It's different to have a wow, blown out experience of the oneness of everything in cosmic bliss, and then coming back in the world and living like a Buddha or a Christ or a Krishna. Interesting, that word is like Krishna. Those 2 words are very close. Or a Bodhisattva. When you get to the Buddhic plane, you are living that. Partially because you have great discernment regarding the higher truths, resulting in higher intuition. Now, Bailey's use of the word intuition is really different than, oh, I had an intuition that you were coming over tomorrow. Wow, I was right. Oh, I knew you were going to call. She would actually put that more in the realm of instinct, which would surprise a lot of people. So I called it higher intuition. She wouldn't actually call it higher intuition. She would call it intuition, because she talks about the difference between instinct to intellect to intuition. And so I'm putting the word higher intuition, which is really not the best word to have there, just simply because most people associate intuition with some sort of psychic knowing that, you were going to call, or it was going to rain tomorrow, or I was going to get that job. Those are actually what she would call lower psychic powers. And they're not at all the higher psychic powers that would demonstrate on the realm of the Buddhic plane. Don't have time for that conversation on the higher and lower psychic powers. Different talk, different day. This is the capacity when you're on the Buddhic plane to see wholes and parts simultaneously. So one way to see a whole is, I love to garden, so I have all these different plants. Oh, plants. But just knowing about all those wonderful plants that I planted in my yard doesn't teach me a thing about how each one of those plants, even though they're all plants, they're all like archetype plants, they're all an individual whole of plant or species. And each plant has individual needs. They need different light. They need different nutrients. They need different water. All these different things. When you're really on the Buddhic plane, when you're really a Bodhisattva, Buddha, Christ, Krishna, you are capable of serving the whole and the part simultaneously. You're capable of seeing it. You're capable of serving it. You know, so a couple more years as I keep learning about the new garden I planted. Each year I'm getting better and better and better, and you know, neighbors are raving about it because I'm learning how to actually serve all of it. And that's just me and my plants in a little garden. That's nothing close to anything on the Buddhic plane. If we want a bodhisattva, though, imagine somebody that really knows how to see and serve humanity, for example, by seeing always the whole of humanity and being able to serve the parts simultaneously. I'll borrow from Buddhism with skillful means. That's a bodhisattva. Bailey uses this phrase that the Buddhic plane or the intuition produces synthetic understanding, creates a synthesis. Again, seeing the whole rainbow, synthesis, all the different colors. The revelation of the higher realms continues to increase when we're on the Buddhic plane. We're becoming more and more a bodhisattva due to being on the path of identification. Don't have time to go into that here. Go back and watch the previous video on the 3 stages. I don't want to redo that whole video here. But essentially, you see the God, you see the God in everyone, and you act like it with love and compassion, not with, you're not, you didn't, you know, you're not a vegetarian, you're not a vegan, you are a vegan, you're a vegetarian, you're a meat eater, you are a meat eater. You know, we're not getting into these pairs of opposites here on the Buddhic plane. We're able to place each one of these things, and this comes from the Bailey model long before the integral model. We're able to place each one of these things in perspective according to their stage of development. So I know all human beings are one, but do I know what stage they're at? Do I know what their needs are at that stage? Do I know how to serve them adequately? That's a bigger deal. And the capacity to do that really well, that's the Buddhic plane. The Atmic plane, getting a little harder for me to really describe these things. I'm borrowing from phrases that inform me about it. Now, we noticed in the Blavatsky model that it stopped at the Atmic plane. On the Ledbetter and Besant model, they went beyond the Atmic plane, and Bailey borrows from that. But here we have again the Atmic permanent atom, which is the end of that spiritual triad. This is bringing in spiritual willpower to enable one to serve the divine plan. So it's not enough just to have the great compassion. We have to have the spiritual willpower to bring heaven on earth, so to speak. Now that can become a massive debate. All the people that think they know what God's plan is, so to speak, trying to make it happen on earth. You know, this is where we really have to get an understanding of these different stages and what it really is about here. And this would relate to Bailey's will, purpose, and power, which is what she calls her Ray 1. And the metaphor I like to use is when we really are using spiritual willpower, we're hitting the egg and a chick comes out. When we're not using spiritual willpower, and we're more actually at the emotional plane and the level of the integrated personality and its need to dominate to get what it wants in the world of 5 senses, we're hitting the egg and we smash that chick. Things don't evolve, things devolve. So really knowing spiritual willpower and how to use it is about knowing how to expand the overall consciousness to a freer, higher, more joyful level, greater realization of the oneness, greater realization of the inclusiveness, greater realization of our shared humanity, greater realization of dismantling our attachment to the realm of the 5 senses. That is spiritual willpower. That's what a great Atma, Mahatma, does. The divine plan is based on global good for the whole and the part. Again, you've gone through the Buddhic plane. You understand the whole and the part. You're not just not going to serve the divine plan for just this one group of humans, because they have a certain sex or they have a certain skin color. That's going to be the emotional plane. That's the emotional plane and the integrated personality doing that stuff. Up here, it's the whole of humanity. It's the whole of the planet, actually, including the animal, plant, and mineral kingdoms. It's the whole. And you're able to serve the whole and the part simultaneously. It's also about being able to enter the state experience of samadhi at will. I got this phrase from a wonderful book, not from Bailey. I have the book here. It's out of print. I'm convincing a friend. Well, actually, I'm not convincing the friend. They're doing it anyway. But I'm reinforcing a friend to republish this book. I guess you can't see it. Self-Culture. Can you see it here? Here it is. Self-Culture by a man named, that's the problem with me doing this backdrop here. By a man, I can't show it. By a man named A.K. Taimni. Taimni. Excellent book. Really enjoyed it. Wasn't from Bailey, but I love this phrase. I had to put it in from his chapter on what is the Atmic Plane. Reactionless self-determination. It's kind of like in the Yoga Sutras, where we learn not to be attached to pleasure or pain. We learn to have self-determination from the highest self, and yet we're not attached to the results. One of the big lessons of the Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? We take, this is from this book as well, we take the power of the solar logos focused in the Jivatma and utilize it for specialized purposes. Now, there is this thing called a planetary logos. I'm putting the book down. A planetary logos, which is basically the life of our planet as long as it exists. There is a thing called a solar logos, which is the life of our solar system, which includes the sun and all the planets, for as long as it exists. So the idea here from Taimni, not from Bailey, but I liked it, putting it in, was that the power of that solar logos is somehow intuited what is needed here to help this planet evolve, and that is intuited from the solar logos and focused in the Jivatma, that specialized Atmic spark of that person, to utilize for special purposes to create a liberation, a greater expansion of consciousness for the whole of humanity and other species even on this earth. That's quite something to be able to do that. That's probably what a lot of traditions would call an avatar. So that's one of the symbols that I like to use here. I'll put that symbol up for the Monadic Plane. This is essentially the heart of God. We see Vishnu. I'm going to skip this stuff, the plane of the second logos and second cosmic etheric and the Anapadaka. This is too involved for this video. I don't want to go there. But this is essentially the heart of God. Who is God? It's our planet that we live, move, and have our being within. Now, this is something I haven't heard from the integral community. You know, they'll talk about Gaia, but they don't really talk about it in the same way as they do in the Bailey model, where our planet is a living entity with a living consciousness. It's not a dead planet. It is alive. We are just little cells within its body. And that's not too hard to figure out when you see this picture taken from outer space. You and I are in there. Just like you see me, I've got all kinds of little cells and things going on, microbes running around, all kinds of things happening inside me. There's all kinds of things happening inside here. This is our immediate God, so to speak. Then there's other gods. There's the solar logos. That's a god. There's the god of the galaxy, of the many galaxies, of the universe, of the multiverse, on and on and on and on, in the externalized, manifested form of it. But when we're talking about the divine plan and we get to the top level in the Bailey model, we are talking about, like Lisa, as this little tiny little That dot's way too big to even show Lisa. That little tiny little speck, that's all I am. I'm so small in there. And so are all of us. The growing level of humility, I'll use a word from Islam, submission. Submit. But of course, it's difficult to know what is the divine plan on the divine plane. And especially when most human beings are in the emotional plane, and the cream of humanity is going to be an integrated personality that's probably going to think it knows the divine plan more than anybody else, won't have any humility, won't want to submit to anybody but their own limited little peon brains and what they can comprehend. And that's why you see something really interesting in the Bailey model that I haven't yet seen enough in Integral. When you go past her first initiation, you are no longer on an individual path of enlightenment. You're on a group path of enlightenment. You recognize more and more and more that this planet is not going to fulfill its mission, so to speak, its purpose. If there's a bunch of little human beings, let's just say, running around in there selfishly, like cancer cells, destroying it and taking it out. You know, if there's like one over here that thinks it knows the divine plan, so it's going to blow up everything around here. That's not how it works as we go up the spiritual path. It's a group process. And one of the things we have to learn how to do, really frustrating, and even Bailey's group didn't make it. We've got to learn how to get along with each other. We have to learn how to respect each other's differences. We have to learn how to respect each other's intuitions. This is where organizational psychology is such a great movement, or also the psychology of different nations, which Bailey went into, the psychology of different nations, the psychology of different organisms, in the way of cities she was talking about, that each one of these evolves. So you have a whole country that also has a type, and that country is going to evolve along a certain path. So will a city. It's kind of exciting to me to see that. I haven't found that yet in the integral movement. Maybe that's why I'm still so passionate about the Bailey model. When we talk about how's the United States evolving, what stage of development is the United States overall? Where's it going next? There are other countries that probably are way more evolved than the United States, but they may not have the same power of the United States. You know, so we have to understand these stages, and we have to look at groups, and groups become cities, and cities become countries, and countries become continents, and continents eventually become a planet. And the only way we're going to do that is as individuals. We always maintain our individuality. We get rid of our personality, the separative, selfish side of it, but we always maintain our individuality. Only way we're going to serve our immediate God is if we're humbled and we get along with each other and we figure out that this is not something any one individual does alone anymore. We will have some bodhisattvas appear. I hope we have some more appear soon, but we are not going to get through this even with just a few bodhisattvas trying to help us out. We're all in it together. At every stage, at every level. And unless we understand that, according to the Bailey model, we're not going to serve our immediate God, which is our planetary logos, or the next immediate God, our solar logos, and the many gods beyond there. So that's it, a brief overview. You were probably grateful that it was so simple at the beginning as we got more and more complicated. Unfortunately, that's how the Bailey model gets. But I hope this helped you enter into it a little better. And as you go over this video again and again, I hope it will help you as we get into other concepts that she has. And I hope most of all, you start to appreciate some of what, in my opinion, this great woman did for all of us. So let me stop sharing my screen. Let me say goodbye to all of you. Whether you agree or disagree with anything in this video, I hope it's giving you some food for thought. I hope it's helping you expand your mind a little bit. And please understand, if you come up with concepts that you say, hey, Lisa, I think you got that one off, I'm more than happy to have you bring those to me. Just try and do it with a little loving kindness. I'm just a human with a small brain too, and we're all in this together. Thank you so much. That's the end of our class for today. Namaste.